Most Malaysians have heard of the Malaysian Indian Blueprint. And if you haven't, it's an initiative meant to tackle long-standing challenges faced by subsections of the Indian community. So it's like giving more youth a shot at university to addressing statelessness. But ideas like these, they don't just come out of thin air, do they? Today, we're speaking with somebody who worked with this behind the scenes, Thanaselan Rajendran, who worked close to a decade in the civil service before moving into social entrepreneurship. He also studied international public and political communication at the University of Sheffield, which this episode is sponsored by, and has since dedicated his career to empowering communities through innovation and policy. Welcome.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you for being here with us today. So glad to have you here. For listeners who are getting to know you for the first time, how would you describe the journey that you've taken so far? So maybe like a brief recap of what you've done.
Right. Thank you, Jamie, for that question. It's a very interesting one because, whenever I get asked this question, I go into this contemplative mood, sometimes even philosophical. So the short answer to that question is that it's been very uncertain, unpredictable. Right? Why so is that, I grew up as a child, as a teenager who loved about everything that this country stood for. And then come a point where I was like, that angry, agitated, activist-minded youth watching it from the outside, trying to understand how this works. And transition into being within the system, understanding how the system works from within, and trying to work around the system to make things happen. And then now I'm out of the system and trying to make, try to change them so that it works better for the people. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I know this is not the end, and I'm quite excited about what comes next.
Definitely not the end. So I want to touch on perhaps your early childhood, right? So you grew up in the 1980s, 1990s, Selangor, when public policy was actually still skewed towards certain races. Social impact was hardly even a thought back then. What was that like for you?
Growing up in the 80s, 90s was like, you were aware, right? Aware that even if you don't fully understand it yet at that time, right? That opportunities were not always equal, right? But at the same time, Malaysia has this beautiful lived reality where we celebrate each other's cultures, each other, shared spaces and shared lives. So I grew up seeing two Malaysias, right? One that was socially inclusive, and the other was still trying to catch up structurally. And I think that contrast stayed with me and naturally led me into this, the space of, social activism to begin with, and then into public policy, and now finally into championing social impact.
Mm-hmm. I think it's quite interesting to say that it started from childhood, and some people might not even say that it's something that's, it stems from a good feeling in a way, because what you mentioned of how, you grew up with two different Malaysias as well. And now, would you say that this Malaysia currently is Satu Malaysia, perhaps?
I think we are moving in that direction. Majority of us want that for this country, that for us to, to live the full aspiration of what this country stood for. But more needs to be done. And I think it's a role everybody has to play in. It's not just that depending on one party to do everything. I think we collectively as Malaysians must equally do our part.
Sure.
If we come with a mindset that let them do or they will do or they must change, nothing is going to change, right? If we all take the effort, collective effort to do our part, and that ripple effect will definitely have a change on what we want.
And that kind of mindset kind of led you to your interest in the topic of public policy and social impact, where you kind of also spent close to a decade in civil service. You were part of the change, right? So what was that like, seeing how decisions at the top ripple down to everyday lives?
Wow, that's I must say that having to serve in the public service was a privilege. It was, but also a reality check, right? In fact, it was incredibly, eye-opening. To give you a bit of a backstory, before even getting into public service, I was sitting at home almost for 8 months jobless, going through the ritual of being a disgraceful son, who had used up resources to to go and study undergraduate again in the UK. Stepping into the Prime Minister's office in July 2010 was like, wow, this is like a sudden transition from from being
It's a
zero to
big
something,
transition.
and that immediately changed the perception of those who thought I was becoming a sore loser. This is a societal pressure that you have to live with, and I think we all go through that period. But I think having been there close to a decade, right? I see how decisions was like the top down approach, and had a ripple effect on the lives of millions of people.
Yeah.
And but also I saw it firsthand how bureaucracy, timing, and sometimes even conflicting priorities can slow things down, right? To be honest, it was very frustrating. Right. Sometimes it can be really, really frustrating, but I think that experience did not discourage me though. And that sort of grounded me, I would say. And also it made me realize that if you want to change the system, or you want to make things better, you got to learn to be more creative and innovative than the bureaucrats. And sometimes, things can move faster. It's just getting the art of doing things different with the system, and then you see bright days.
Yeah, I think from that I can take away that, change, it's a bit cheesy, but change is always the constant, right? You roll with the moves, you roll with the changes as well.
Yeah.
And I guess on a topic about changes, I'd like to go into transitions, right? So you've moved across government, research, and entrepreneurship. So what motivated these transitions?
Well, honestly, none of it was a perfectly planned transition. But they sort of happened at that point in time, and but I think each transition was really about getting closer to my purpose, and realizing my potentials. To be honest, government gave me perspective, right, about how things happen, and how changes are effected, and how the things that we read and the things that we do are curated, and how they're formulated, right? Research gave me the ability to structure, and to look for evidence in what you do. And entrepreneurship, which is what I'm doing currently, which was something that I never dreamt of in my life. I used to say that I would be a bad businessman. I'll never do business. Business is not for me, right? But well, in the end, that entrepreneurship, gave me the speed and the ability to execute things better and faster.
It's almost as though everything came full circle. Would you say that?
I would definitely say that, yes, life is really a full circle.
Now, you studied in Sheffield. You did your postgraduate in Sheffield, right? Masters in International Public and Political Communication. People often talk about how university, it's a big pivot point in your life, be it like undergraduate or postgraduate, even more so if you did your studies abroad. Now, with this being your postgrad studies in Sheffield or with Sheffield, what was that like for you? What was that experience like?
Oh, I love this question because whenever people ask me about Sheffield, I get very emotional. Sheffield is first and foremost home wherever I am. And you can see I'm wearing Sheffield today in my label.
Gotta represent.
Yes, representing Sheffield, the strong spirit of Sheffield. Sheffield honestly was a reset for me, right? As I said earlier, this wasn't my first time studying in the UK. So it wasn't entirely a new experience, but this time it was more intentional, right? I went to Sheffield at a point where life was very uncertain. I had just left the government after serving for almost 10 years, and wasn't sure what was coming next. So that's why Sheffield became the reset for me. A space that to reflect, not just about what I have done, and it also about what should I do next. So it was, in a way, Sheffield became that bridge that connected all my transitions. It's a very, very interesting experience there.
I guess in a way, different circumstances push us in different directions, in new directions, good directions even. So how you mentioned, Sheffield was that reset point for you. What did it open up for you afterwards?
Yeah, so I think first of all, Sheffield helped me to change the way I think. Right. So coming from government, obviously that you're so used to structure, hierarchy, systems, and stuff like that. Sheffield literally challenged that. It kind of taught me to question assumptions, look at issues from multiple perspectives, and most importantly, help to connect empathy with evidence. Right. You realize very quickly that many challenges that we think unique to Malaysians are actually not so unique to us. We share that globally, and just in different forms. So all of this combined sort of help to shape how and why I do things the way I do it today. So that was a very, I think, it was very not just academically important. It was also like it changed the way you shape your life, and you get your direction going.
I think it's quite inspiring to hear not just the technical skills that you would traditionally get from your studies abroad, right? But also, like you said, finding solutions through empathy as well. I think in today's day and age, that's something that it can be a little bit hard to emulate at work, but hearing you say that it has a warm feeling to it, I must say.
Yeah.
Now, since we're on the topic of Sheffield, I have to ask, how did you end up in Sheffield and why Sheffield? I mean, there are 100, like probably more than 100 universities in the UK. So how did you end up there?
Okay, I like that. Well, in all honesty, the decision to further my studies, postgraduate, was a very last minute decision, right? Like, while many of my former classmates would have started the process the December, the November before 2018. Mine honestly kickstarted in June 2018. That's literally 3 months before the semester begins, right? I had to make the call after, suddenly having nothing to do professionally with my life. I just left the service, and there's a missing bit in my life, right? And I had to make the decision. Also, then why particularly Sheffield? There's a backstory to that as well. A former staff of mine at the PM's department was applying to study in Sheffield at that time. And so he was waiting for me to give him a referral letter.
Oh.
And he couldn't get hold of me until the last day, or the eve of the day I lost my job. He walked up to me and said, "Silan, please." And so that letter ended up being the last letter I signed as the special officer to the Prime Minister.
I see.
And so when the idea of furthering studies came up, and then, Sheffield was like the closest I could think of, because I had just signed a letter to the university. So I was doing a bit of a browsing through of the potential courses. I came across the IPPC course, which appeared very applied. And of course, the journalism school of Sheffield was one of the top in the UK at the time, and I think still it is still one of the top. So yeah, I went for it, and I got lucky. I got the offer, and September 2018, I arrived in Sheffield.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So when you arrived and throughout your time there, what was student life like for you?
Oh, it was it was very different from what undergraduate life was. Having come to school after working, adapting to it was quite tough in the beginning, because you don't wake up the rush to go to work, that you have meetings to attend, you have KPIs to achieve, and stuff like that. A very laid back life, to be honest. You wake up. I mean, you're a master of your own time. You're responsible for everything that you do. There's no one who's going to sit and monitor and watch you over. But I enjoyed that student life, being a student again, because of the diversity of the classroom to begin with, the culture of the city. Sheffield was very different from London and other cities in the UK. You have students from different systems, different political systems, environments as well. So And it was very nice to kind of, debate and argue and, converse with people about the differences that we have. And very fulfilling in the sense that I personally enjoyed helping, or not helping, I would say, but guiding some friends from different political culture who did not understand how certain things like democracy works, and having to share with them how things work, and also understanding, like, in a non-democratic system, how things function. And I realized, I also learned that it is okay not to be democratic in some systems. They seem to be fine about it, right? So, yeah, it sort of changed some of the notions and the way you think. Yeah.
It is true, this kind of conversations that you have with your peers where you kind of learn a little bit more about their perspectives and other people's perspectives, right?
Yeah.
So I was just a little curious if you have a specific Sheffield memory that might still be inspiring you.
Oh, well, a lot of memories. I think one that always stands out is the tail end of my time there in the UK, in Sheffield, particularly, is my graduation day. Yeah, in the winter of 2020, just before COVID hit and changed our life. Not so much because the ceremony itself, but because of what it represented. As I said earlier, I went to Sheffield at the lowest point in my life, and so standing there in that hall on that day, in that robe and whatnot, right?
It's quite a momentous
Oh,
occasion.
you could feel the weight of what you had done in that last 1 year, finally setting in. Because otherwise, the student life was like, okay, nice, it's nice to study, but wearing that robe and putting on that cap was like, okay,
This
I
is
sort of
it.
did it.
Yeah.
And it was just like it's like closing one chapter, but then quietly you were preparing for the other. And then you look around and see the people that travel with you in that journey, people from all parts of the world. And it's sort of like a reminder that you can always start over again and again and again. And I think that sort of stayed with me. And I think every major decision I've made since, in the last six years since that graduation, goes back to that moment. And it also reminds me that transitions are not setbacks. They're just like giving you another opportunity to redefine your path and fine tune your way forward. Yeah.
For sure. And I guess your way forward was also Pepper Labs, right? You're now leading Pepper Labs. You're also making waves in the community. On the topic of how your projects combine like technology, entrepreneurship, community empowerment, in a world where AI is advancing, it's in our daily lives, right? How would you then balance the tech side and the human side of things?
So I think tech, in my honest opinion, is not the end goal. It's just a tool. We've got to stop thinking that it is taking over our lives and that's going to control our lives. It is just a tool, right? AI, for example, right? AI, for example, is incredibly powerful, and I think it's becoming increasingly difficult for us to function in our daily lives without AI, right? But it doesn't translate into better livelihoods or better access or better outcomes for people. Then it's just a noise, lah. I think the functionality, the usage of it must be controlled, and we must take control of it, as humans. So when we design, our interventions, whether it's techie intervention or AI related, it comes from a human problem first. Then we bring in technology as the enabler. You understand the need of the people, and then you allow them to apply or adopt what is applicable to them, that works for them, right? Because it's not a one solution fit all kind of a thing, right? And that's how we have, over the last 1.5 years, in fact, have worked on, initiatives that ranging from training. At least over 400,000 people have so far benefited from our AI literacy program.
Wow.
Working with global tech giants like Google, Microsoft, and now AWS. And we also built local community economic models centered on digital solutions like the DAPO digital initiative that we are implementing. First in Kuala Lumpur and now all over Malaysia, and this helps the micro entrepreneurs to generate additional income. So it's a very human centric approach and that's how we marry the need of the community with the importance of using applicable text. Yeah.
I think what you said about the marrying of both, it kind of struck to me in a way such that it is also about how, yes, there is a balance as well, but how does AI or tech complement the work that you're doing or the mission that you are trying to strive for, right?
So I would look at it from a purely a perspective of what they gain out of this, right? Why do they need AI, for example? It's a choice that we make, right? Some of us may be traditional, that we want to stick to our old ways of doing things. Nope, I will use my own brain to do my work. It's okay. That's fine. That's not wrong, right? And some of us may feel like we need AI to support the work that we are doing, to automate some of the stuff that we have, to simplify the way we think, right? For example, I am to an extent a traditionalist in doing certain things, and I use AI only to just tie the loose ends together. Sometimes to perfect the paper that I'm working on. So when we work with the communities, it's very simple. Like, okay, what are your pain points? What are the challenges that you have? Right? Let us understand that first. Then we'll try and give them a visualization of what is available. Right? Take, for example, minutes of meeting. People struggle with that often because it takes hours and hours, if not days, to come out with the minutes of meeting. We all have lived through that experience, right? Bosses getting frustrated with the staff is getting agitated because having to listen to the recordings on the notes. There are a lot of solutions that's available, and we try and make people understand that, look, there are things that can actually help you and save your time. So it's all about understanding what the needs of the people are, and then trying and guiding them in the right path to adopt it, and handhold them to learn further. Yeah.
So on that note, I was just a little curious about whether or not you have had any story or a particular incident from Pepper Labs that still has stuck with you throughout this time, something that reminds you of why you do what you do.
Okay, so well, again, plenty of stories, but I think some of those most emotional stories that sticks to me, and this is the thing that I carry with me wherever I go, is working with the micro entrepreneurs from the underserved communities. Right? It's an example of how we used the most basic tech to help them improve or increase their business productivity and sales and whatnot, right? I know this single mother who's raising 5 kids on her own, right? We got to know her during the pandemic, and we helped her to take her business digital. Now she's doing quite well. Just last year, she texted me and said that, Mr. Seelan, happy to share that my eldest daughter is going to start her MBBS education in a private college here in Malaysia. I was genuinely happy for her. I asked her, out of concern, ma'am, this is a good news. Question is, how are you going to afford it? You have to ask that question because we know medicine is not cheap, especially in a private setting in this country, right? The answer that she gave me really, I had tears in my eyes reading the answer. She said, "You guys have taught me well enough. I will use the knowledge I've learned from y'all, and educate my daughter by selling cakes and cookies." It was like the simplest answer someone could give, a genuine answer, but like, say, wow, okay. Because sometimes you don't see the result of the work that you do. Sometimes we are proud of the numbers that we are reporting, about the millions they have generated, about the thousands that we have impacted. But it's really this kind of genuine stories that really makes me feel good about the work that you do. And
the lives that you're actually impacting through the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you a bit of a joy to see that people are actually with the little bit of help that you give. I like to emphasize this. Sometimes guys have to drag our participants to the finishing line. Maybe that's what they need. We can handhold. Maybe dragging them to the finishing line is also important. So at least then they can at least finish that journey, and then stand on their own feet. And when you do this kind of little help and little stuff, and then you see the ripple effect of it, and it just gives you the reassurance that you're on the right track. Just keep doing better and better.
I saw something, I think last year, talking about how kindness is its own ripple effect, right? Where you start extending your kindness, you don't know where that kindness of yours, that act of kindness of yours leads to as well. So for instance, like what you mentioned of this mother, her act of kindness could be also to supporting her child in her medicine studies
Not
and
just
beyond
a
that.
child. This entrepreneur, this lady, this mother herself, right now stands in as a mentor to support her fellow peers. This is the kind of thing that we don't only teach them how to sell, how to do business or how to increase their income. We also inadvertently create leaders, grassroots leaders who are there, who steps up for their own community at the end. And that's the thing that, like I said earlier in our session, right? That if all of us do our part, we can achieve that Malaysia that we've always wanted to that we've always dreamt of. Yeah.
Now, looking ahead, do you see any changes in the social impact industry? Is it like, would you see it evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
It definitely will evolve because I think things like technology will be the central of everything, like AI, right? It is here to stay, I think, and knowing how technology rapidly evolves, we probably will have something apart from AI moving forward, right? And then I think the what will be a norm or essential is partnerships and collaborations. Gone will be the day where you can do it by yourself. You will have to have partners. You will have to have collaborations, and then impact measurement. I think will become more rigorous. Like we mentioned earlier, in the 80s and 90s, social impact was like almost non-existent, but there were impacts being made in people's life. It's just not shouted out loud. But I think moving forward, that will become more and more central in everything that we do. And I think import solutions will need to scale. Right, pilots will not be enough anymore.
I think it will be interesting to see how all of that will play out in the next 5 to 10 years for sure.
Yeah.
We really don't know what's going to happen next, right? But we can just try to be as prepared as we can and help
Do
others.
what we can. Yeah.
Literally like what you mentioned, right? So I have a little interesting question here. So us and the viewers and the listeners now know that you've held multiple roles across your career, and these roles are roles where people often assume are quite overwhelmingly busy, from government service to now leading Pepper Labs. How do you live by the principle of no one is too busy lah? No one is too busy to make time to go to the gym, yum cha with your friends. How do you live by that?
I think it's really about priorities, lah. Right? We are all busy, like you said. Yeah, busy is that buzzword that all of us use to run away from things sometimes, right? But I think you would agree with me, right? We always make time for what matters, right? Whether it's family or personal self care, or hobbies and our interests and whatnot, right? And I think for me, what despite all this busy life and whatnot, I think anything that creates impact or builds partnerships, giving back to people, I'll always have time for that.
Now, earlier on, we talked about how when you moved to, or your journey to go to Sheffield was kind of like suddenly. So my question here, or rather topic, is about sometimes, the best things in life, they do happen unexpectedly, right? And I wanted to ask whether there were any moments in your career or studies that felt like happy accidents, but ended up shaping your path. But I think you covered that quite a bit in how Sheffield, could have been, maybe, would you agree to say?
I think almost everything was happy accidents. Yeah, put it that way. Yeah.
I think that's really nice to hear, like what you said earlier, reset points and transitions, they're not necessarily bad. And it's also a lot to do with your perspective on how you perceive those things. How do you take it in stride as you go along in your future as well?
Yeah.
Now, do you have any advice to give Malaysian students who are considering their studies in Sheffield?
Oh, wow. I would say go, but go with intention, right? Go with intention. Don't just go, to just have go abroad for the experience, which I know many people will do, right? But go knowing that what you want to take away. right? How it fits into your journey, and even if you don't have things figured out after, it's okay. Don't worry, because that time that we spend there, surely will stimulate something after. It's all about how you position yourself, how you narrate your life experience. I made lasting friendships in Sheffield. In fact, happy to share that some of the best friendships were made in Sheffield. I have a group of Malaysians who were in Sheffield at the same time I was, and we now bond together at all times under the in the spirit of in the spirit and brand called the Sheffield Supper Club.
Oh,
It's a
that's
grouping of
very cute.
friends who keep our bond together. We continue to live the life that we lived in Sheffield, by visiting all the good cafes here in Malaysia, even recently in the ASEAN region,
Wow.
and we cherish the time that we had there. And that is also, to me personally, they are my supporting system. They sort of push me and encourage me, and we encourage each other to to do better and go forward in our life. And there's something magical about Sheffield that I can't explain in words. But the bottom line is, it's the steel city, or what is known as a steel city. So the least that will happen to you if you go to Sheffield is at least it'll make you stronger, if not fitter.
All right. I think it's really, really endearing to hear that, you have something called the Sheffield Supper Club together
Yeah,
with your friends and you guys are
it's a
still meeting
foodies
up.
club basically.
Oh, but any reason to go out and eat, right? We
Yeah.
are Malaysians after
Yes.
all.
Yes.
All right. Just a few closing questions. In light of what's been happening in the world today, are there any particular qualities that you think future leaders would need the most?
I think first is empathy, right? We all need to have that. Without that, it's going to be difficult to navigate what's ahead of us, right? We all need to have the empathy. The second is to be able to adapt, right? Adapt with the changing landscape, the changing situations, changing circumstances. Don't stay rigid on that, right?
Mm.
And the ability to navigate complexity. As you said, the challenges that we're facing today globally is becoming more and more complex.
Yeah, yeah.
Back home, it's getting even complex, right? We are seeing the cracks in what we stood for, right? Whether it's from the perspective of race, religious sentiments, to ordinary lives, economically and whatnot. So I think we must be able to navigate that. Yeah.
I think with the next generation and even the current generation that's working, all of us, it's like what you said, each of us have to work towards it together. You have to make a decision and be firm in saying that I want to make a change as well. And
Yeah.
it's got to start somewhere.
That's right.
Now, to close us off, if you could leave students with one message about education and impact, what would it be?
Yeah. So education should not just help you to rise. It should put you in a position to uplift others, because that's a real measure of a successful education. I think I will leave with that parting note.
All right. Thank you so much for being here with us, Silam.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you very much.